Oh, awesome. Thank you for that. But let me double check to your point. Yeah, your point. Yeah, audio is good.
It's just your issue, that's fine. But the issue of the lack of athletic facilities, draw a straight line. So I know everywhere. I mean, Stockton took me everywhere across the city. Some like perks that I've been to before. And you can play soccer there or nothing.
All right, everybody, we'll get started shortly. We're trying to get the mic set up. I know you guys probably can't hear me so low volume. Sorry. Yeah, see, I knew this was the one. We got this one working. Plus, this is like, old school, got the phone, got it. All right. I know folks are still ordering drinks, so we'll totally let y'all do your thing. Got plenty of seats when you guys are finished. I'm Alderperson Andre Vasquez, 40th Ward. How y'all doing? All right. So we are going to get started with our 40th Ward Development Town Hall. Those of you who've been around for some time know that every quarter we do a town hall to cover all of the things that we do. Fourth quarter is usually budget. What we're doing differently this year is we have so much development coming to the 40th Ward in the next number of years that we're dedicating one town hall just to focus on development. And so before we get started, I want to make sure we introduce the crew. So at the front, you might have seen a couple of folks. You might have seen Kat Sharp, who's our Chief of Staff. Give it for Kat. As well, right?
Yes, he's directing people up the stairs.
Got it. Outside directing people upstairs, we also have Yasmin Chavi, who's our Neighbor Services Coordinator as well. Right up. Yes, we have Nora Fabro, who's our newest member of the squad, part-time community engagement coordinator. All right. We've got Samantha Martinez, our Deputy Director of Neighbor Services. You guys have President Corporate Parking, you might reach out all the time. I know. It's okay. Next, we've also got our Director of Neighbor Services, Deirdre O'Connor, is here with us. And it's doing a really lion's share of the presentation. We've got Allison Murphy, our Director of Development. Our team, especially they call her Murph, is what I refer to. Murph is the squad captain. Thanks. So we're going to go over a lot. So let's kind of get started. So I'm not going to go over every bullet point, but these are the values of how we lead in the 40th Ward when we think about what's important, right? Services, safety, development, community engagement, and a forward focus. Always looking to see what we can reimagine, things that we can improve, never feeling comfortable with how we are, knowing we can always do better, right? For today, it is going to be development. So I want to go through really what our focus is there. It's making sure we improve our economic ecosystem through infrastructure, investment, affordable housing, and healthy local business districts that benefit all. We kind of break that up into different priorities. I'll go over those real quickly. Bike and pedestrian safety, affordable housing, accessible transit, economic development, and those of you already seen a number of murals all over the board. Public art is really a big thing we want to make sure is something we kind of hang our hat on. So we are going to start going into this. So here's the agenda. We're going to kind of go over a little bit of explaining. Oh yes, thank you. This is why Murph is with us. Okay. First, we got some rules of the road, people. We're not on the road, but you know what I mean. So you all may have received a couple of things. You got commitment cards. If you did, raise your hand up. If you received one, you came in. It looks like a sheet of paper. You can write your name and stuff on it.
We'll pass them out.
We'll pass them out now. That's why we ask. Good thing. Also going to pass around index cards. So as you see the presentation, if you have questions, write those questions down. Once we are completed, we'll have a Q&A. We'll be going off of those cards. We want to make sure we do it orderly. We respect everybody's time. We can get all those questions. And that way, if you don't answer all of them, we can take some of those, make sure we create like an FAQ and email folks back after. We can follow up. Not immediately, of course, because Murph would kill me. So, so we're going to go over kind of a general infrastructure explainer. Then we're going to talk through our major projects, and that is a lot. We're talking streets, bikes, transit, parks, housing, economic development, public art. Then we're going to go to the menu program, which is the repairs, but also the people's budget, which is our participatory budgeting program. How many of y'all know about PB here in the 40? I'm gonna start asking who does it, so I know like we can get y'all. So okay, and then we're gonna go over opportunities to get involved because we know that nobody does this stuff by themselves. No office is truly successful without a community and neighbors getting involved. So we know where to improve and know we have partners to improve it with. All right, so how do we pay for this stuff, right? Thank you guys. You guys pay for this stuff. You guys know that? So, but how? And we won't go into full detail. Part of it is you pay your taxes. Thank you for those tax dollars. It is how you, when we talk about taxes, I don't think we talk about it enough. I think most elected officials like to stay away from the term, act like it's a third rail, but really we need to have an understanding of the relationship. You all pay taxes to help improve services, infrastructure, other things in your area, and you want to see a return on that investment. If you don't see a return on the amount of tax dollars you put in, you start feeling a certain way about government and where you're living, right? So part of our job is to make sure we explain and show you all what some of those returns are, because it's not often talked about. So when you think about what pays for infrastructure, there's a lot of different things, right? So the city had bonded out funds, talking like billion dollars, to do capital improvements, right? So when you think about your major streets, these aren't things that are dealt with smaller pocket funds. These are larger funds, larger infrastructure needs to get done. So you've got capital improvement funds or CIP. So when you hear CIP, that's what we're referring to. You've got tax increment financing, or what is now the bond deal. So these are two things. Tax incremental financing, your TIFs, are areas that are designated to collect a little bit extra tax. Then those funds go into create infrastructure projects in those designated areas. Now, that's a bit inequitable because if you're not in a TIF area, you can't get those funds. So what Mayor Johnson and the City Council did in this first year is actually move to a bond program. So you're bonding now to get $1.25 billion to be used towards a lot of different programs, building infrastructure, the same things one would do in a TIF, but now you can do them in all different places that aren't necessarily a TIF area. There's a whole lot more I can get into. That's just a general explainer. There are books written about this stuff, guys. Feel free to ask us questions and email the office. Then you got menu funds. So every single year, each ward gets $1.5 million to do repairs or infrastructure projects, right? So your curb and gutter, our residential resurfacing, those things get handled. The other thing that may get handled is like one alley a year. Because to fix an alley, just for background, you're paying $250,000 to do one block. You only get $1.5 million a year, so at best you can do one out of all the alleys in the ward. Just want to level set because everyone looks at their alley and thinks, when you guys gonna fix it? So you've got the menu funds. We also do the projects, right? Public art in certain places that we've done. We've done improvements to parks, to schools as well. And then you've got every other level of government. State, county, federal also have funds and grants to fund these things. So you've got a lot of funds to actually fix and improve things, but it's also about directing that and doing it in a way that's cohesive and help improve the area. I'm not going to go over all of this stuff, but we will be going over probably 75% of it during this presentation. Here's a snapshot of all the stuff that in 1 year, all those funds paid for. There's plenty more than that, but these are just the big ones. Yep, get your screenshot, take a picture. Also, by the way, this is streaming on Facebook. We're also gonna have it recorded, so you can share that as well. All right. And then here is our larger. This mic's on it. This larger capital improvement plans. So this is like we have arterial resurfacing. How many of y'all know what an arterial street is? How many of y'all don't? I'm gonna start doing don't just to make sure people. Okay, cool. So your residential streets are your smaller streets. Right, your arterials are like your Western, your Damon, your larger streets that take a whole lot of funds to be able to address. Right? They're bigger, wider, and take on more traffic. Collector streets are like your mid streets. Then we're going to talk to some of the streetscapes, which are larger projects, which we've been able to move forward here in the 40th, as well as people's favorite, people's gas line replacement. Gotta love it. And Department of Water Management upgrades to sewer. We have this stuff on our website. You'll be able to check out details later. But if you could imagine, everything there that's a color represents a piece and part of the ward and the street that's being affected by one or more of those things. It's a lot, always. But what we're going to do is really break down streets right now, and we're going to have Murph take it from you.
Hi, everyone.
So I am both excited and very sorry to tell you that we have 7 arterial resurfacing projects coming up this year. I'm excited because this is good news. Your streets are going to be smoother. Also because of the city's complete streets ordinance, any arterial resurfacing project is going to have to include pedestrian and bike safety infrastructure. So all these 7 projects that we have for you this year are going to include that type of infrastructure, which is great news. The bad news is that there's going to be a lot of construction this year. I'm very sorry about that. Mostly these AR projects take about, that's arterial resurfacing, take about 2 to 3 months, but the streets are never closed entirely during that time. It's usually a lane at a time. But yeah, when you think back to that map that we looked at, that's what's going to happen here in our world, in probably about a month. So just to go over the difference between these projects, we have kind of the biggest level of project would be a streetscape. So this is a major street project that usually obviously will include a full resurfacing, but also will include a number of like beautification efforts like landscaping, adding identifiers, adding lighting, new sidewalks, pedestrian and bike safety improvements. And then 1 level down from that, we have arterial resurfacing, which is again resurfacing of those major roads throughout the city. And those also include pedestrian and bike safety improvements. And then 1 step down from that, we have collector street resurfacing, which are those lower volume roads, like Granville is a good example of one of those. And those typically are just resurfacing. But for a lot of our collector roads, we're also looking at pedestrian and bike safety infrastructure for those as well. So we are going to go through some of the major AR projects that are coming up this year. You can see on this map here, anything that's in red is an arterial resurfacing project. A lot of parallel arterials happening. So one of the things that we're trying to do as a board is work with CDOT and make sure that these are being scheduled in such a way that they're not having a really negative effect on the community. Construction is going to construction. It's going to be a pain, but we want to do things like make sure when we're doing Damon, we're not getting outside of bands in high school, right when school's about to let out, things like that. And then anything in blue is going to be those collector street resurfacing projects. I'm certain you can't see the street names, but I will tell you those ones over there on the left are Corndale and Granville, which I know will be very welcome to anyone who is in the streets. Okay, so we're going to kind of fly through these, but I wanted to give you a sense of some of the improvements that are going to come as part of these projects. I am personally very proud of the Damon Avenue projects, in no small part because I live on Damon. But in addition to obviously the resurfacing, we have a couple of raised crosswalks coming as part of Damon Avenue. This is a really exciting thing. Both of those crosswalks are going to be on Winnemac and Winona, so right outside Imanson High School and right outside Winnemac Park. For those of you who are unfamiliar with raised crosswalks, you can see what that looks like here. It basically is raising the level of a crosswalk to the sidewalk level. So it does a couple of things. It improves visibility for cars seeing pedestrians because they're taller. And it also functions as kind of a low-grade speed hump because you are raising the level of the street. So we're going to have at least 2 of those on Damon Ave. We're going to have a whole host of bump outs and curb extensions, which if you don't know what that is, you can see it in this picture right here. The function of a bump out or a curb extension is to make a a crosswalk shorter. So as a pedestrian, you have a little bit less wider of a street to crawler yourself across. And it also usually has the impact of calming down left turns and also just calming traffic in general. The other thing that we may have coming in as part of Damon Avenue, but we have yet to confirm this, is a small stretch of protected bike lanes over near the cemetery on Bowmanville and Bryn Mawr. So that's something we're hoping to squeeze in as part of this project as well. This should be happening in summer 2024. I haven't gotten a date yet, but I'm told it'll be starting in June. So if you live near Damon, get ready. It's gonna be great. The next one that I think will be extremely good news to a lot of folks is Ashland Avenue. If you have ever been a pedestrian on Ashland Avenue, you know how necessary pedestrian safety improvements are on this block, and there are a whole lot of them coming on Ashland. So this is a huge resurfacing project that is going to encompass several different wards. I think it goes all the way down to possibly Belmont. So it's a real big one. In our ward, we're going to see some things like there's a number of pedestrian islands coming at key intersections to make that crossing shorter, and to also add a little island in the middle if traffic is really wild on Ashland. We have a new traffic signal coming to Ashland and Berwyn, which is going to help with a lot of things, but one of them is because that plaza, East Mallory Plaza, is coming to Catalpa. We now are seeing the necessity of having a traffic signal on Berwyn to kind of calm traffic and direct traffic at that intersection. There are also going to be in-lane bus lanes, bump outs and curb extensions on a whole lot of the intersections up and down Ashland Avenue, and there's a lot of stuff coming with Ashland. I can put it all on this list. But we did a huge traffic study there last year, and we're really, really excited to be able to bring so many of these improvements as part of our Ashland resurfacing next year. This should be happening this year as well. It, I believe, is starting in the north, so it may come south to us like a little bit later in the summer or in the fall, but it should be starting this year. Ravenswood, it's another exciting one. So Ravenswood has a resurfacing project going on from Peterson to Eastwood. So this is something that we've partnered with the 47th Ward and thinking about how Ravenswood can better serve the neighborhood, can better serve cyclists and pedestrians as well, and also cars, because it's driving on the road on Ravenswood. So I say that, I don't drive, but I'm in the car sometimes. So in addition to obviously the resurfacing, we have a bunch of bump outs and curb extensions coming to the 40th Ward stretch of Ravenswood. We have bike-friendly speed humps coming because there's going to be a neighborhood bike route all up and down Ravenswood. That shared bike lane where it's 2 ways is going to connect to the greenway that starts, I believe, at when it starts to become 1 way. So it's going to be a very cool project. In addition, there's some bike corrals coming, there's some sidewalk replacement happening, which we usually don't get in an AR project, so that's pretty exciting. And that, again, is scheduled to happen in 2024. We will probably have a better idea of exactly what in the next few weeks. Western Avenue. So we had the north part of the 40th Ward stretch of Western Avenue happen last year. So if any of you live in that area, work in that area, you may have seen some resurfacing going on. We're now moving south. So our stretch is going to be from Foster to Leland, and it's going to include resurfacing, bump outs and curb extensions, pedestrian islands at major intersections. Wenemac is one of those. And then once you get to the 47th Ward, it's going to turn into that Western Ave streetscape that's happening as part of the Brown Line station. So this is all part of our plan to make Western Avenue a more pleasant place to be. Not just because our office. Exactly. And here too. So next is California Avenue. This is going to be a resurfacing project from Peterson to Winona. This is a little bit of a shorter list when it comes to pedestrian safety because California is a fairly narrow road. So some of those bigger things like pedestrian islands are harder to do on California being a narrow road. We are getting a lot of bump outs and curb extensions up and down California. So those will be coming this year. There's a number of these. I believe it's California, Damon, Bryn Mawr, and one other one, maybe Pratt, are federally funded, which means they have to happen this year. So that's always good news. So Bryn Mawr, we only have a really tiny stretch of this. This is happening mostly west of our board, but we are having Bryn Mawr from Virginia to Lincoln resurface. That's going to include some curb extensions and bump outs, and also possibly raised crosswalks along 1 or 2 of those intersections as well. And then lastly, we have Pratt up in the north of the 40th ward. So again, this is part of a much larger project from Western to Sheridan. In the 40th ward, we have a smaller stretch that just is adjacent to Warren Park. But this is going to include a bunch of really exciting things. Probably the most exciting thing is going to include a stretch of protected bike lanes. So I'm going to turn this over to the other person in a moment who's going to take you through some of the bikes things happening. But one of the things that the city is really working to do is be strategic about where we're putting protected bike lanes and then how we're connecting those with those neighborhood greenways. So the Winnemac Greenway is probably one that some of you have seen. And that's the plan, is to kind of have these bigger, more robust protected bike lanes that are connected by these low stress neighborhood routes. So we're having those on Pratt. We're also having those on Lincoln. Would you like to talk more about that?
Yeah. All right. So, and we also resurfacing happening. Mic check, here we go, thank you. So we also have Thorndale, Granville, Ainsley that are getting resurfaced as well. Let's talk streetscapes. So, upon taking office in our first term, really want to see how we can rejuvenate a lot of the 40th ward. Some of you all know that, like, when you think of Lincoln Square, you think of Lawrence South. You don't think of what's happening in Lawrence North. So, when we were looking at streets that definitely could be improved, Lawrence was one. I know you're feeling it. I'm with you. And Lincoln was one where we were able to get $16 million worth of TIF funds to really try to create what we call the Lincoln Avenue North Arts District, or LANA. And so it's definitely something where you kind of plant the seeds and ultimately see the harvest. I think term over term, year over year, you're getting to see what those changes will become, right? So where the streetscape is broken into two sections. You've got, it says Ainsley to Catalpa, but for you on the record, head Western to Catalpa is the stretch we're talking about. It's the Ainsley Arts Plaza, it's that whole stretch. So we will be having protected bike lanes coming into that whole section, actually from Western all the way to Berwyn, to then connect to the Berwyn Green Line. Greenway, my apologies. We've got new sidewalk resurfacing. We've also got these larger people spaces. So this is the corner of Catalpa and Lincoln. So let me clarify. Yeah, the whole stretch is from Western to Catalpa along Lincoln, and then Catalpa from Lincoln over to Western. Catalpa used to be the widest road in the city of Chicago because trolleys used to do the turnarounds there. We've narrowed it so people can actually cross and it slows down traffic. So we added parking there by adding diagonal parking, which allowed us the ability to also remove some parking on Lincoln and then create protected bike lane and not have like a large net loss for folks who are thinking about, you know, having parking stop. So yeah, we have people spaces for folks to hang out. It makes it easier for restaurants to like have expanded outdoor dining, places to really check out, helps more people hang out to check out and patronize the local businesses. So that's occurring there. The Ainsley Arts Plaza will show a little bit more later. Then you've got the stretch from Foster to Catalpa. So you've got some plaza there. You've got just the one stretch from Foster to Berwyn is protected bike lane when you're going Foster North. And then again, as I mentioned, Catalpa's getting narrowed. As you can tell from the picture, a lot more pedestrian and bike safety. What our goal is once you get that going, you increase some of the density along Lincoln so you have more people to sustain the local businesses in the area. You end up having more thriving local storefronts. We've also created living workspaces. So imagine if you're a first-time artist or photographer, right? You can't afford a storefront and an apartment because you're living in the real world. So the living workspace is a storefront, is an apartment with a storefront. So in effect, you can do both in the same space. They end up being a little bit cheaper to rent in a way that allows somebody to develop their first business. So we'll have those along that area as well. When you got all that going, you get more traffic coming in, then we want to talk to CTA about getting more frequent Lincoln Avenue bus going. Right now, we're just planting the seed. We're not there yet, but we're getting there, right? There's a larger goal in what we're doing. Also adding artwork along the whole area. The Lawrence streetscape. How many of y'all are so glad that thing's almost over? Yeah, Lincoln's coming, guys. But in the meantime, it's great. Lawrence, as you all know, was definitely like driving through the moon, except for those moments where your sewer covers were flying through because there was water pumping out. Do you guys remember that storm? No. Good. Thanks. I'm glad you guys don't remember that. You do. Okay. So this is all largely completed. We've got, as you can tell, the pavers, spaces created. We got street lights coming in. We're gonna have the identifiers coming in shortly. So by end of, I'm gonna say fall. I like to give folks extra time. You should see this thing completed. Probably. This is in Andersonville, a stretch of Catalpa between Clark and Ashland. Through COVID, we were able to create shared space and kind of block it off for a little bit so you can do farmers markets there. People wrap their head around it in a way that allowed us to create a plaza. And because it's a space that not only was for farmers markets, but really had a lot of community activism happening, we are naming it after our Black trans sister who is no longer with us, Elise Mallory. So yeah, to see representation in the world, being able to have these kind of landmark opportunities are something we want to make sure we move forward. So this should be getting started in 2025, hopefully completed in 2025. Fingers crossed. Okay, next, we're going to go into bike stuff. So a lot of our cycle family here have long been screaming for something they like to call bike grid now. Here. So it is about creating the same kind of infrastructure for bikes that hasn't existed. When you think about what we want to get to, it's a world where you have multimodal transportation, right? When you look at a city in the U.S., it's largely been driven through car culture and become very car-centric. It's why the streets are so wide. People race through them. Anxiety and road rage after COVID's gotten worse. Makes it a lot harder for people to get on public transportation because that's not delivering the way it should. We're working on that. Also trying to create the infrastructure so people can take bikes wherever they need to go. The more folks you get on public transportation, the more folks you get on bikes, the less congested you see on the road if you're a driver. It's also better for the environment. It's where the direction we need to go in. And so this is what the northeast corner of the bike grid would look like in partnership with the Department of Transportation. The 48th, 49th, 50th, and our ward have been really talking through it. So I won't go too much into it, but the blue represents bike routes, neighborhood routes are the green, the dark blue are protected bike lane. And so in trying to figure out how to tie it all together, this is about trying to figure out what can be done in the short term, what can be done in the long term, taking into account what actual impediments there are, right? Like Rosso Cemetery, right? Those are just realities and figuring out what a network looks like. So wanted to kind of share that with you all as a larger goal. We're having conversations going forward. So Lincoln Avenue has protected bike lanes, as I mentioned. As Murph had mentioned, Pratt is getting protected bike lane over by Warren Park. Then we know about the Leland Greenway, right? Y'all have been at 47th Ward, been leading a lot on that. We partnered up because we do have a stretch of Leland as well. So we've got curb extensions, pavement markings, speed humps as well to make that more bike friendly. We also have an A&T bike way. So from Rockwell to Lincoln would be largely one-way or counterflow. And then Western to Damon being two-way, right? And then Winternet Greenway also, that was actually up. That surprised us, but it was actually got there super quick. So the city actually paid. That's also what? Oh, it was also our idea. It was also our idea. Sorry, I didn't think of it. Here's what's not our idea: painting over potholes and calling it a greenway. So the city will paint those, and then when it can resurface, it does so. It doesn't pause to resurface and then paint. Kind of backwards, we know. We've been trying to have conversations to get that rectified, but sometimes the city does what the city does. So, next we go to Metro. You guys know we got a new Metro station in 44, right? Sweet. June 11th, Tuesday, 10 a.m., we're going to have the dedication for this over Peterson Ridge, where the station is, of course. It's also 40 years for Metro that they'll be celebrating, so come on through. You want to call the shout outs? Okay, we have to do the shout outs. Oh, yes. Shout out to our native plant committee, because we also want to make sure. That's right. We want to make sure the community was at the forefront, and when they are making these landscape improvements, that they are taking into account what the neighbors want to see, and utilizing native species in a way that makes sense and is sustainable in the long term. And shout out to our pollinator posses as well. So Scott Fink, Brett Jelinek, Trisha Van Eck, and Jean Smiling Coyote, who push us to always do better, and we are grateful for it. Okay, so yeah, we're also working on making that a lot more pedestrian friendly when you look at the intersection, knowing that a lot of folks are going to be using it more. We're going to be talking to CTA about Peterson as well, right? Because now that you've got Peterson Ridge Metro Station, let's look at CTA and figure out those routes in a way that actually is more conducive for people traveling. All right. And now I want to pull up our Director of Neighbor Services and Park Aficionado, Deirdre O'Connor. Oh, sorry. And we have to put some respect on our name. Also, the 20th District Councilor, so a public safety elected official. Give it up for Deirdre.
I'm the Director of Neighbor Services, and I just want to shout out our wonderful volunteers who help us with the front desk, who are here tonight. We have Deborah here. These are the folks that are answering the phone when you call our office, and we are eternally grateful for them, and they do this for free out of the kindness of their hearts. It's been a busy couple weeks, so we're super grateful for them. And if you're interested in volunteering, you should sign up for front desk.
And they don't get paid for
So my favorite part about this role is I get to oversee. Okay, so there are a lot of parking events. First off, we have Winamac. Right now, the slated construction for the baseball diamond is coming. That is going to be starting soon. Then they're also doing tennis court renovations, including some pickleball striping, and ADA accessible pathways, and some draining improvements to the field. So we're super to see that come. Warren Park. So we have a lot of improvements coming to Warren Park. The cricket field is getting a complete renovation, including lighting. Shuffleboard, horseshoe, and bocce ball courts are all being redone and ADA accessible. Pickleball and volleyball courts are being done. Basketball and cricket batting cages are being replaced. And then a lovely nature play area is coming that was designed a lot by the children themselves. They had children see how they wanted to imagine a park, and then they played around the kids, which I thought was a really great thing that the park did. So that is supposed to be starting in summer, early fall, is what we're being told. Park 599, and soon to be renamed West Edgewater Green Park. This is in its final stages, we hope. They have been planting trees, and it is moving along. So this should be done hopefully by the end of June. And then stay tuned, because we're gonna have a wonderful ribbon cutting celebration for the park. So yeah, stay tuned, sign up for a newsletter. And then some other park improvements. If anyone's been over to Emerson Park recently, we installed an excellent exercise thing. There's a real great video of Andre working out in some early mornings. You can catch him there, shooting hoops or using the exercise equipment. So some other things that are happening right now is they're doing tennis court renovations. That's currently happening and should be done soon. Greenbrier, they are getting, disregard that new workout equipment. That's not happening at Greenbrier. Sorry. Good PV project idea if anyone wants it at Greenbrier. So they are getting tennis court and basketball court renovations. Currently, that construction has started. If you have a question, you can just write it on an index card and we'll answer it for Q&A. And then West Ridge was one of our winners with our PV project last year, and so they are getting some new, we're trying to figure out some storage and an art installation for them. And that is all in the design planning stages, and we hope to see that construction begin in 2025. And then not mentioned here is Mather Park. I just met with Mather Park this week, and we are in talks with Mather, the principal at Mather Park and Chicago Park Districts on doing a lot of improvements to the park there at Mather. If anyone's been to the park, it's a little run down and she needs a lot of love. So it's my personal pet project. So stay tuned for Mather Park improvements. And I'm now going to pass it back to the Alder.
All right, so we've got Haven on Lincoln. Those of you may know, used to be the Diplomat Motel. We took some city funds, part of it ARPA, part of it TIF, to basically acquire the property and convert it into non-congregate shelter. What does that mean? That means a shelter where each person has the dignity of their own unit. It means it also has support services on site. So when somebody's trying to take you through the journey of being homeless and finding permanent housing, that is where one would be able to find that kind of opportunity. This would be the first in the city to ever happen. We're also working on making it a community center. We want to make it a community center, so if you're in the 40th ward, let's say for example, we got unhoused neighbors, being able to utilize that as an opportunity, as a referral process, as well as an ER like a Swedish. If it does well, and I believe it will, we're invested in it doing so, I can see these multiplying across the wards, so across different wards, to be able to really provide that kind of opportunity of support and system that we know people deserve. So that's here. Now we've got some developments that we've had in the past year. 5035 Lincoln, how many of you guys know that old pile of bricks with murals on it, huh? Yeah. So it took a lot of time, but we're actually having the two kind of adjacent properties. The one that's already has the bones to it is being built currently. And then being added to it is a 5-story mixed-use building with 47 units, 9 of which are going to be affordable. Also looking at having like either a cafe or like one of these live workspaces I mentioned prior there. So that's coming. And then Lawrence Gateway, so that's just west of the river, on the south side of Lawrence, maybe like a block west. So we approved there a 5-story mixed-use building, 40 units, 8 affordable. That thing is gorgeous. So that's coming as well. Might have a tenant coming in on the retail side. I won't steal any thunder, but that is announced. We'll be happy to let you guys know. But it's good to know that you already have a tenant coming in when this thing is built. What is the address on that one? 2919 Lincoln? It's something. 29 something. We'll be on the website. Go to the website. Go team. All right. And then 5400 North Ashland. So that one's Balmoral and Ashland. That one, there was a proposal for 18 units. Hearing back from the neighbors about concerns about the aesthetics on it. Some of the density brought it down the floor. So we're looking at 15 units or 3 affordable, and that's coming as well. All of these are also apartments. They're apartments instead of condos. We know that there needs to be more rental space, there needs to be more affordability, especially in the 40th ward. So that is part of our goal and values and moving forward. Lana, mentioned her before. Here's some nice little snapshots of what's coming. So along with these infrastructure, we're also doing a lot of artwork. This might look familiar to you all as the corner of Lawrence and Western right there. This is what we call a mural makeover. The property itself was on sale for $6 million. Anybody got $6 million to purchase that thing? No, didn't think so. So they're not doing a lot to fix the place. So what we did is we talked to them and said, hey, do me a favor, board the thing up and we'll have somebody do artwork on the front. So at least it's not the eyesore that it's been. Also, we're adding artwork and murals in different places, including 4827 North Lincoln. So if you were on the Ainsley Arts Plaza and you look north on Lincoln, there's like a huge building that has a funeral service sign. That's going to be a whole mural, that whole thing. We got grant funding from the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events to be able to get that going in partnership with the Lincoln Square Ravenswood Chamber. A&Z Arts Plaza, you guys saw the early version, right? So we had paint as well as some improvements there, but that was only to hold us over until the full streetscape. This is a better look as to what it's gonna look like, right? So you're gonna have a stage power there so you can actually do more events. And that'll be coming with the rest of the streetscape. So this year, it will be started, and fingers crossed, will be completed this year as well. It does say spring 2025 for the whole thing, but I believe our streetscape should be starting now.
It's starting in June, but completion.
Yeah, it could take a bit. All right, and then this is another one of our babies, the Western Ave rezone. So in trying to create more affordability, you either try to mandate 20% if you have a property that's 10 units or more, or you can try to take it on in more of a bulk fashion. So what we've done here is throughout the 40th ward, from Leland all the way to Lunt, we're upzoning a lot of the properties so that you can create more density, have more residential on top of the mixed use. What the zoning also does is it makes it harder to have auto body shops and dealerships. So that way you can, I was waiting for that part, but I knew it was some class for that. So, but that allows you to really reimagine what kind of businesses you have along Western and have enough density above it to be able to support it. And I'll just say this, which is what I tell a lot of neighbors, if you're not gonna have height on a street like Western, I don't know what street you're gonna be able to do it on, right? Looking at really the kind of thoroughfare it is, kind of lends itself to this conversation. So this is actually the first time it'll be happening in the city of Chicago to have this kind of proactive plan zoning of an area, but we also know the 47th ward is doing it. We believe the 50th ward will be soon to follow suit, and want to give credit to Alderwoman Deborah Silverstein, who led to the vision to have the Western Ave corridor study, which has led to the takeaways that have also led to this now. I said led a lot. So you can check more out at 40thward.org /Western rezone. And so we've gone through a lot up to this point. There's a quiz now. Do you guys remember anything that happened in the last 20 slides? No, okay. This is why you should tune into the 40th Ward website. So I will have Murph walk you through that.
How's everybody doing? So we, as of this morning, have a new construction website where you can see details on all of these projects. So everything we have told you here, with the exception of the AR projects, because we're waiting for final designs on those, you can now find at 40thward.org /projects. You are going to be able to go and search projects by type. So if you want to know about bike infrastructure coming to the ward, if you want to know about housing, pedestrian safety, any of that, you can search by type, you can search by zip code, or you can search by status. So if you want to know what's coming up, if you want to know what's been completed, you can search by all those things and then click into any of these projects to see all of the details. We also have construction updates on those pages. So for most of our major projects, we do ask that contractors be sending us weekly updates, and those will automatically update to the website. So if you get busy to read the newsletter, you can always go to 40thward.org /projects to see what the latest update is. The other thing that you can do is subscribe for updates to a particular project. So if you are already signed up for the newsletter, this isn't going to like sign you up twice and give you a bunch more emails. But what it will mean is that when something major happens with one of those projects, you'll get notified. So say with the recent Metra project, if you wanted to come to the station dedication ceremony or know when it was opening, you would have gotten an email about that specifically. So you can do that on any of these project pages to keep track of what we're doing in the 40th ward. So now that we've talked about big projects, we're going to talk a little bit about smaller projects that are the kinds that affect your homes, your properties, the sidewalks you walk on every day, the streets you bike on every day or drive on every day. So we talked about a lot of the big ways of funding large city projects. We also have what's known as our menu program, which is $1.5 million in infrastructure funds that we get and every ward gets every year to make infrastructure repairs or to build new infrastructure of some kind. So every ward does this differently. Every ward spends those funds differently. In our ward, we take $1 million of that budget and we go through what's known as a participatory budgeting process, where you, 40th Ward residents, ages 14 and up, can help us decide how to spend $1 million. So we ask people to vote on two things. The first is how much we spend on repairs versus new projects. One of the new things we're doing this year, which you may have seen on our front table, is we have developed a large document explaining how we make all these decisions, how much a lot of these things cost, so you can start thinking about that now and start thinking about projects you might want to propose, and just knowing how much those things cost so you can be a little bit better informed when it comes time to vote. The other thing that we ask people to vote on is which projects we should fund. So I'm going to talk a little bit more into detail about how we narrow down those different projects to come to a final ballot a little bit later. But a couple other important things to note here. The 0.5 of that 1.5 million we reserve for any emergency repairs that come up throughout the year. For us, sometimes we submitted a traffic study, those take about 8 months, and we might get something in July that says, hey, you need to add bump outs or something like that, and that gives us the leeway to still be able to do that without waiting until the next year if it's something that's really urgent. And same deal with if someone has a really drastic curb and gutter repair needed, we don't want to make you have to wait until the next year if you don't have to spend the money. I have no control over when CDOT actually constructs the repair, but we are working on that. Last two things with menu funds, these funds have to be spent on permanent infrastructure, which means anything that's infrastructure related, your streets, your sidewalks, can also be a parks installation or a schools installation, but it can't be things like a program like rat abatement, it can't be things like tree trimming, it has to be either the repair or installation of infrastructure, and it also has to be on public property. We can't fix your houses as much as I would love to help with that. So it has to be on streets, sidewalks, alleys, parks, public schools, things like that. So we think about this money kind of two different ways. We think about the portion that's going to our menu repairs, and then the portion that's going towards the people's budget, those projects that we vote on every year. Those both have two very different processes. So this is how the menu process works. Anything having to do with a menu repair, like a sidewalk repair, an alley resurfacing, something like that, we take proposals for those requests throughout the year. You can submit those anytime you want and let us know what you want repaired in your ward. We review them every week. We go through and see how urgent it is, where it is, if it's eligible for a menu repair. If it's not, we send it to our neighbor services team who sees if there's something else we can do about it. And then every year at the beginning of the year, usually it happens in late January or early February, we're going to choose what projects we'd like to try to fund, and then we send them to the Department of Transportation, CDOT, who tells us how much all of those are going to cost. So it takes them usually about a month and a half, 2 months to get us estimates back, and then we authorize what projects we're going to be able to afford that year. That just happened about 2 weeks ago. And then when construction happens is I did a presentation about this once, but I just had that Elmo shrugging gif. I don't know how they make construction decisions. It's very confusing. We pester them about it quite a bit. But generally, the hope is that if you authorize something by April or May, it will get done in that year. In the past few years, there's been concrete issues and labor issues, so they are a bit behind on concrete projects, but I've been told they anticipate that they will catch up this year. So if you've been waiting on an alley reconstruction, this may be your year. I'll talk to them afterwards. So here's how you submit menu repairs. We are going to ask you for a bunch of information about what kind of menu repair you're looking for. We're going to ask you to tell you where it is. Depending on what you're asking for, we might ask for something a little bit different. So if it's a sidewalk repair, we might ask for an address. If it's an alley, we want to know what 4 streets are bounded by that alley. We're going to ask you for pictures a lot of the time. For things like resurfacing of streets, this is less important. For things like alley repairs, sidewalk repairs, it's really helpful because it helps us determine how severe and urgent of an issue it is. If you have anything that keeps you from taking pictures, that's okay. Just let us know. We'll send a staff member out. But if you can't include a picture, it really helps us out. And then Lastly, no, actually, we're gonna ask you to make sure it's the 40th ward, because we did a redistricting recently, and sometimes we get things for the 47th ward. And then we send them to Joshua at the 47th. So you can submit your repair request anytime at bit.ly/40fixit. This is case sensitive, so it's in all caps. You can also find this information on our website at 40thward.org/development, and you can find a link to that form there. So how do we make many repair decisions? This is something that we obviously are not gonna put every repair up to a vote, because A, that would take a really long time, and B, repairs are something that we want to make sure are an equitable process that we're really thinking through from a big picture, and not just about like how many people can come out to vote for something. So here are some of the things that we look at when we're deciding between projects. One of them is equity. It's really, really important to us to make sure that we're spending money equitably throughout the ward. We map out our menu projects every year before we submit them, because we want to make sure that not all of them are concentrated on one area of the ward. The other one is community impact. So how many people will it serve? Is this going to solve an issue? This might be something where if there's two sidewalks that are in equally bad condition, we can only do one. We might start with the one that is on a really high traffic street, and then go back the next year for the one that's on a lower traffic street. Severity, obviously, how bad is the sidewalk? We got some bad, I'm really on the sidewalks, okay, you can talk about pedestrian, I don't drive. Severity, you know, is it something where there's an entire tree root, you know, growing up out of the sidewalk? Is it a street that is just like so littered with potholes they can't be patched anymore? Or is it like not in great condition, but maybe it can go another year or two? And then feasibility, like, is this doable with the amount of funds we have? If it's not, we'll think about if there are other ways we can do it, but that's something obviously we need to think through because we're limited on funds. And then once we make those decisions, we send them to CDOT and they look through them based on an entirely different set of criteria. One of the major things they look for is conflict. So any conflicting work that's happening with, say, a utility company, I can almost guarantee you that if you've complained about a residential street that is in like a rough condition, we have probably submitted it for like 3 years running and been told that we have to wait because people's gas. They're totally gonna do it next year. Don't worry, guys. It's gonna happen. It never happens. No shade to people's gas. A little bit of shade to people's gas. So a great example is Granville from Dane to Point. We've been submitting that stretch for years now. This year we finally kind of put our foot down and said, no, it's our turn, we're not waiting anymore. So that's gonna happen this year. But those are some of the things that they look at. Another thing they look at is cost. Sometimes our estimate will be that like a sidewalk or a street resurfacing will cost about $55,000 for a block, and then they'll come back and realize there's a ton more work needs to be done, and it's going to be $150,000 instead. And then sometimes it's happening for a different project. Maybe somebody has submitted a sidewalk inspection request, and the in-house CDOT team is already going to do it. They'll let us know it's already happening, and we can take that off the list. So that's how we make menu decisions, and that is how we get to this beautiful map of the projects that are happening this year. There are more projects on this year's map than there usually are because they're doing a lot of catch-up work from last year. So some of these are projects that we submitted in 2023, or in the cases of a couple of alleys, 2022. I think there's actually one 2021 alley, which is sad. But the hope is that all of those will now get done this year. So on our website at 40thward.org/development, you can see this map and you can click on any of these markers and see information about that project. If we have information on when it's happening, that will be in those markers. It will also have a status. So if it says authorized, that means we paid for it, but it's not scheduled yet. If it says in progress, that means it's been scheduled. It's probably going to start in the next 2 weeks. If it's completed, it's done. So that's menu. People's budget, totally different thing, totally different process, even though it's the same money. We accept proposals for projects for the people's budget, usually through like the summer to the fall. So we have just opened up proposals for this year's new round of PB. And the way this process looks is we have the submission period that's usually kicks off in Q2 of the year, where anyone can submit us a project idea. These should be new projects. So anytime you have a repair request, you can submit it to the repair form. These are for like new projects that you're excited about. Maybe it's a new bike lane somewhere that doesn't have a bike lane. Maybe it's a parks installation that you want to see. And obviously, again, it does still have to be on city-owned property, does still have to be permanent infrastructure that will last at least 5 years. So next what we do is in Q3 around August or September of every year, we have our People's Budget Committee that goes through all these proposals and reviews them based on a number of criteria that we'll talk about in a moment. And they're the ones that kind of pare those proposals down to a final ballot. So we have our semi-finalists, the staff will reach out to city departments, get estimates, make sure it's feasible, and then we pare that down to a final ballot, and that's what goes to all of you to vote on. That vote usually happens in November and December of every year, and the results are announced in January of the following year. So this is how you submit project proposals. We'll ask you many of the same questions, but with a little bit different criteria as we do on many repairs. You'll need to add a description of what you want to see. Don't be stressed out by this. It doesn't have to be like a dissertation on what you want to see with diagrams. Like this is an example of a successful PB proposal, and it's literally a sentence long. So, you know, if you have details, that's great, but don't get intimidated by thinking that you need to have a ton of information. That's our job. We can follow up on those things. Proposals are officially open as of yesterday. So you can submit your ideas anytime at bit.ly/2024-PB. You can also see that information on our website at 44.org/PB. Okay, so how do we decide, or rather, how does our People's Budget Committee decide on PB projects? Our timeline, we already went over, so let's not do that again. Our criteria, these are some of the things that we look at. We look at equity. We want to make sure we're serving all areas of the ward. We love to see Winnemac, but we also want to see Mather Park as well. We look at sustainability. Is this something that impacts our natural environment in a positive way? That can be directly or indirectly. So it can be like, I want to do a bunch of bump outs along Ainsley, but wouldn't it be nice if there were planted bump outs to add greenery in the ward? That counts. Accessibility, this is really an important thing to us as a ward and hopefully as a city, is we want to make sure that any project we're installing is thinking about ADA accessibility. We really feel that looking at principles of what's called universal design, where you're thinking about how does this serve people of all different abilities, makes the project stronger for everyone. So that's a really good thing to consider when you're submitting a proposal. We also look at, community value. Is this something that will solve an issue facing our community? Is it in an area that a lot of people will be able to enjoy or benefit from? And we want to see some creativity. Again, that doesn't have to mean you are proposing an art installation, though that's lovely, but it can just mean you're thinking of a project in a slightly new way, or it's adding something new to the ward. And then of course, feasibility. So the way that I like to say this is like a roller coaster in a park. Maybe not, for a lot of reasons, and cost is one of them. But like a water feature, yeah, maybe, we can look into that, we can see if we can do that. Generally, we want to keep those costs of like below $300,000. You don't have to know exactly how much it is. If you have an idea, err towards submitting it anyway, and we'll see how expensive it's going to be. So that's what our PB committee looks at when we're making those decisions. So this is the part where I would love for all of you to look at those commitment cards that you hopefully got passed out, and if not, you will get them momentarily. None of this really works without all of you. We work hard in this office and we love working hard, but part of what makes us that fun and worth it is we get to work in community with people. And there's a bunch of ways to get involved if you want to get more involved in making the ward a better place. So first of all, join our People's Budget Committee. We are now recruiting for the People's Budget Committee. If you want to help, look at project proposals and pare down to a final ballot and know when that project is installed that you were a part of that. You can join our People's Budget Committee. It meets usually monthly from June to August and once every other week during proposal season, which is usually like August, September. And it meets on Zoom, so we can be as accessible as possible. You can also join our environmental board if you particularly care about making the 40th Ward a more sustainable place. The environmental board works on a number of things. They work on policy items, and then they also work on more tangible resources for people in the 40th Ward. Right now, they're working a lot on home electrification, but we also got a lot of neighbors who are really into putting more native plants into the ward, and the environmental board wants to do what the community is excited about doing. So if you want to make the ward a little bit of a greener place and you have an idea for how to do it, you should join the environmental board. They meet monthly, every second Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. also on Zoom. And then lastly, we have our Safe Streets Board. This is for any neighbors who really want to improve pedestrian and bike safety and access to transit and safety for everyone in the 40th Ward. What we do on the board is we look at areas of concern in the ward and we discuss recommendations that we think would make these areas safer. This also meets monthly, the second Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. and also on Zoom. And to close us out here, I would like to invite up Sammy Marks, who is a member of our Safe Streets Board and has been so, like, I cannot tell you how much time Sammy has put in to helping us do things like overhaul our menu process to make it work a little bit better and be a little bit more streamlined. He's really a genius with the process and has been very generous with his time, and we love him. So thank you, Mark, and Richard.
And so the menu is also we split the lower locally and there's an open bar. But I want to just talk through a couple of projects the Safe Streets Board has been working on. And again, remind you, right, this is a lot of cool stuff happening, a lot of the older staff and the office doing incredible work. This doesn't happen without neighbors stepping up, getting involved, giving feedback, and really engaging, right? We live here, this is our neighborhood, this is why we're here in the first place. So Project Sidewalk, raise your hand if you've heard Project Sidewalk before. Very cool. Handful of hands. In short, national program, national initiative to use basically Google Maps, the street view of Google Maps to see and scan and survey the entire country, largely urban areas, to see where there's issues. University of Illinois Chicago has a Chicago-specific program running. We partnered with them to survey the entire 40th Ward. Huge shout out to Brandon, who did a vast majority of the, that's right, Brandon, you here? Huge round of applause, Brandon. Thank you for that. This is a ton of data, and what this does is helps give a very data-centric, data-driven point of view to the alder's office. They go straight to the city and say, here are the blocks that we have 25 issues. Here are the blocks next to high senior citizen area, concentrated zones where we really particularly need to invest. It's a very data-driven approach. It's really cool. It's really exciting, and you know, this is pretty extreme end of the spectrum where this office is actually using a very data-intensive, very data-first way to look at our neighborhood. And then Peterson Avenue safety planning. I've got a question for you folks. What happens when you take a metro station and put it on top of one of the highest crash area intersections, and also put it on top of an area where you're trying to connect a whole bunch of bike lanes together? I don't know either, but that's what we're trying to figure out. This is a really tricky problem, right? Because we do have this sort of bottleneck created by the cemetery by Rosehill. You've got the train station, a lot of excitement, a lot of traffic. So we have been working for months now, I think, Allison, thank you for the transparency on this, iterating with the board on proposals that are in the city design. We've got a lot of transparency. Huge shout out to Odie, to Jessica, and Brandon again for heavy engagement here. Right, a lot of the things that the board is going to the city about are questions, issues, concerns that we've been bringing up on the committee. So there's a lot of really good dialogue happening. If you are passionate, as many of us are, about safely navigating our neighborhood, not in a car, come hang out, come join. We're doing a lot of cool stuff. Thank you.
Shout out to Odile, who I think is here. Odile has been huge, and a good city group has been hugely helping us think about how the metro station can serve our community. They made us plan recommendations. Metro changed every single plant they were going to plant based on that group's recommendation. The safety planning process came out of Odile's, and the good city group walks around the board. So again, buy a drink if she drinks, if not, buy a mocktail.
All right. I want you guys to give yourself a round of applause. You have survived Developalooza 2024. Great. Here's a to-do list of things that you should do if you haven't done already. Sign up for the newsletter. Check out Shy Street Work, where you can find out what work is happening in your area. Check out the development page. Submit menu repair requests, right? If we don't know that it needs repair, we can't address it. So if you see it, submit it so that we know it. Also, if you have ideas for improvements, whether it's the parks or schools, send that our way. Volunteer for our boards, and you guys have your commitment cards. If you put your contact information, check off any of the boxes that you may be interested in. We'll reach out to you to see if there's something you want to partner up with us on. Cool? And then lastly, I really believe in the each one, reach one philosophy. So you find one neighbor that doesn't know about this stuff, you let them know, because again, your tax dollars pay for this stuff. And so I think we've shown a whole ton of return as it relates to development happening here in the 40th Ward, which I think you all should be super excited about, even though it's going to be a whole lot of work to get there. So we want to make sure we dedicated that. So now we are going to leave the contact information up for our ward office, 5620 Northwestern. These are the ward office hours. Here's how you can contact us, submit requests, and then we're going to open it up to questions. You're going to read them.
Yeah, if you have an index card that you want us to ask a question, just raise it up and one of our staff members will come around.
Or I can give you a blank note card.
Or if you need a note card, raise your hand and someone will come around. So first question, which is a great one. Who designs street improvement projects? How does your office assess their success or failure with regard to increase or decrease safety for pedestrians, bikers, and motorists? What are your metrics for understanding success or failure to then make changes? And do you only rely on CDOT for metrics and analysis?
I'm gonna guess that's more than one question. So, as it pertains to design, it is the Department of Transportation, right? They hire people to put it all together. They tend to have multiple community processes that they try to hear everything out. They do look at it through a lens of safety as well as investment. I think many of you all who are focused on like urban planning and thinking about this infrastructure know that there is a lot of room for improvement. So although they do have data related to like traffic and incidents that occur before and after, it is always a work in progress. I think it's also a good opportunity for neighbors who want to get involved in Safe Streets Board to find opportunities to figure out, hey, where can we find out what's being worked on? What can we find out as far as details of how we can improve it? Because again, it is a work in progress and not all the wards have the same level of scrutiny with the departments when they're working on this stuff. I do want to shout out Alderman Matt Martin of the 47th Ward. Because of the Complete Streets, yeah, that's my brother right there. Because of the Complete Streets Ordinance, Blues Brothers, if you will. Because of the Complete Streets Ordinance, a lot of these improvements are now by law occurring when you're making any resurface changes. But we know we can always do more, and so we want neighbors to come in and partner up with us. So if you're interested in being a part of it, check that box that says Safe Streets Boards on that commitment card.
Okay, awesome. Contra bike lane was painted onto Argyle and Rockwell, but the road was painted over as a total mess. Too many potholes to safely ride on. How can we do a better job coordinating street resurfacing before bike lanes are painted? So I can take this one in particular. One of the reasons that this happened on this street is often they actually do coordinate these things. So the Ainsley Bikeway is a good example of this. There's a resurfacing scheduled for summer of this year, and then they're going to come through and paint the bike lane after that resurfacing. Argyle and Rockwell is a classic case of utility work that took longer than it was supposed to, and the city not being able to do these. So again, we've been submitting that stretch of Rockwell and Argyle for a few years now, and it's been on hold every year because of, I believe, people's gas work in that section. So this is an example of the city saying, cost benefit analysis, let's not wait to have a shared bike lane. Paint is pretty inexpensive. let's just paint it while we're waiting for that work to conclude, and then when we resurface, we will then be able to repaint it pretty easily. But in general, this is something we are pestering CDOT about all the time.
Also, really quickly, how many of y'all do not have the Shy 311 app? Put a hand up. Then you, my friend, should get them. The reason why I mentioned that is if you submit a request for a pothole, the city knows and then it's able to fill those in. Most people don't, right? You're driving around, you're not going to pull over. The 40th ward, we actually drive every street in the ward twice a year to like mark every single pothole. It's why we drive really slow on these streets, or adequately, depending on how your view of velocity is. But in order to help us out, if you see a pothole on your street, you can walk out there and just submit the request, take a picture, upload it onto the app. That way the city can actually address it a lot more quickly, as well as a number of service requests as well.
We got a question here about BRT. So a couple of questions actually. So I'm aware the Western BRT would take almost a decade to build if approved. How can that timeline be shortened? And why BRT and not LRT for Western?
Yeah, what's the LRT? Light rail, yeah. Why not pull the trains on Western? I mean, well, we're getting there. So here, like, when you think about, like, we were just part of active transportation, had a meeting 2 days ago about like how to engage in the community process. When you're thinking about creating a bus lane along Western, for example, you've got to take into consideration how it affects the local businesses, how it affects where those, that, just to be real, where those where that parking ends up going, instead of going to the residential streets. How does that change affect the cost of value of a property? How does that change the property taxes? How does that change rent? How does that potentially displace people? How do you know through each section of Western what the different particular changes need to be? So when you think about all of that change that needs to happen, it does require really a number of years to actually get the assessment, get the involvement to get to that. And then you got to think about the funding on top of it to try to get it going, as well as we all know whenever construction happens, you think you know what you're going to dig into and you find out that it's not, and you got to pay more to do that, and it adds more time to the whole process. So it really is that kind of a process. That doesn't mean you don't do it, but it's also being realistic about getting the buy-in from everyone on the front end, or not buy-in, but everyone's different perspective. Because if you don't get it on the front end, you think you have a almost finished product, you start to get to going, and then all of a sudden one department or one community says, you didn't think about this, right? So part of what we did to start up is myself, Alderman Martin, Alderman LaSpada, started working on getting all the alders that share Western Avenue to sign off on a letter calling for a study. The city, under Mayor Johnson, has a Better Streets for Buses program, so they're starting to look at this stuff. There are 19 different alders that share Western. I spent a good day and got like 15 of them to sign on. All the alders that share Western to sign on, but one, and he's not in opposition to what we're doing. He just has a concern about a small stretch, so couldn't sign on because of that. So that's a good thing. But yes, it is something transformational. It will take time to think through. I'll say the one thing that is also a factor is the parking meter deal. Because if you're removing anything, now you've got to look at that deal, which means a Department of Law conversation. So all those different factors are what lead to it being such a large and long project, a monumental one, but still one worth undertaking, which is why we're working on moving it forward. And then you do LRT at some point, decades after.
Let me give us an easy one. Ainsley Arts Plaza plants, are they pollinators? Yes! Yay! Okay, so non-artery streets are in terrible shape, harming cars and walkers. Why are they so bad, and how do politics affect repairs? How are these a priority? Can I take this one?
You're talking to residential smaller streets, right? Here's a number of reasons. One, they get the same wear and tear that your major streets do. And so when you think about the fact that most people use residential streets as like cut-throughs, you're getting a lot more wear and tear than what's necessary. So something we think about as a public safety angle is how you make residential streets remain residential streets. So it's adding things like traffic diverters, so someone doesn't think that they can just cut through and get to a next major street. The more you see people driving that way, it's going to wear your road down. You see people racing from one end to the other, which leads to more public safety incidents. And on another public safety angle, stolen motor vehicles, drive-bys, car establishment. If it's easier to speed in and out of a residential neighborhood, it happens more frequently. So thinking through longer term infrastructure that makes a residential street something that's not as easy to cut through allows it to actually last longer. But again, we need to hear from neighbors when it's like, hey, we really need this resurfacing. We then submit it to the menu repair to try to get those done as well. So we do have a list as neighbors let us know about that.
The Trader Joe's.
It got traded. No, sorry. The US Bank in Andersonville was gonna be a Trader Joe's. There was a father-son that owned the building. The father passed away. He was the one who was most involved in the deal. During that time, the bank itself was actually looking at its prospects on the West Coast because of COVID and how it's affecting their business model. So it kind of fell through. We've been trying to re-engage everyone, but I'm gonna tell you, it looks pretty unlikely at this stage. That being said, we're gonna continue to try to see what can be done there, but I'm not gonna sell anybody a promise on a Trader Joe showing up if I don't see it stuff.
Can you define what affordable means in dollars?
Depends how much dollars you got, right? So, the way the city looks at affordability is through a lens of a term, an acronym AMI, average median income. So, depending on where you are in Chicago, but your average overall is about $80,000 a year. You look at taking that, you divide it into three. 1/3 of that should go into parking. Sorry, never parking. Don't get mad at me, guys. In apartments or affordability is what I meant. So when we look at affordability, the city has a law. If you have a development that's 10 units or more that's new, you're required to provide 20% of it, or 2 units per every 10, as affordable. What it means by affordable is someone who makes 60% of the average median income being able to spend 1/3 of those dollars on their rent. What we talk to is doing a no spread of anywhere from 20% AMI to 60% AMI, so it averages, or 80%, so it averages 60. That's a whole lot of numbers. But what you're talking about, I believe, is like something like $1,100 and $1,200 for like a studio or 1 bedroom. You're looking at a couple hundred more when you go more bedrooms. So it's about that range. If you go to our website or contact us, we can send you the actual graph that gives you a breakdown of what those costs are.
Can you or have you considered extending the P Street designation of the park more than 1 mile?
We have not, but we're open to it. So we actually did it on Lincoln and created a P Street or a pedestrian street. It makes it a lot harder to have driveways in the area. If you think about what it's like to have like parents and strollers trying to get from one point to the other, or seniors. So it makes it harder to have those kind of driveways. We've done it along Lincoln as part of the streetscape. We're open to looking at Clark as well, and have thought about potentially pedestrianizing this stretch there, but that's a larger conversation process.
I read that protected bike lanes cost $120,000 a mile. Why? Okay, it was all in caps. So I actually think they cost more than that. I can give a quick explanation of why, just to set expectations. A residential street resurfacing costs about $55,000 to do, and that's just asphalt, and asphalt is cheaper than concrete. And it also doesn't require things like, sometimes you gotta move utilities, sometimes you gotta move sewers, so there's just like a lot more complexity involved in adding that level of concrete work.
Also, it's not just concrete, there's also labor involved to actually get it done, which means you gotta pay the people doing it. And you gotta pay them a fair wage, you gotta make sure that they're getting paid to get their benefits, because they are putting in a lot of work to get it done too.
Do you plan to add pedestrian crossing improvements on Francisco between Lawrence and Foster? None were included in that project except for the one in the middle of Lawrence. Yes, we have actually asked the county, one of the other funding sources we mentioned, to fund a series of pedestrian safety improvements on Francisco throughout. So there was part of Francisco included in the Lawrence Ave streetscape, but the neighbors there are wonderful and incredibly engaged and brought to our attention a lot of other issues in that neighborhood with pedestrian safety. So this is a great example of how we need y'all to do our jobs well. Those neighbors were so helpful in pointing out the issues to us that they were, feeling on the ground in their community. And then we were able to reach out to the county to fund some of those improvements. So we should have more details about that in the next couple weeks. Can you briefly explain the shift from TIFs to bonds to pay for citywide projects?
Yeah. Yeah, somebody put a timer up. We can host a cover board night. Wednesday nights, we'll have a whole conversation, but basically we borrow the funding to bond out, have to ultimately pay it all back, but take that money on the front end and then look to find different projects as well as infrastructure or different programs to increase affordability and be able to build more across the city. So as these TIFs, which are usually 13 years in length, as they expire, those funds go back into the city's general fund to pay off some of that debt, which ultimately we believe it has a larger benefit value for the city rather than just in the small places where you find a TIF. But yeah, we do whole meeting on that.
Is there a way to get better enforcement at crosswalks and stop signs? Tired of almost getting run over by cars and having to jump out of their way? You go.
So we're gonna set up a crossing guard program for you guys, get you some of that. No, as far as enforcement, it is challenging, right? We know that there are speed cameras, for example, that are located by parks and schools. We're looking to make sure that they're all throughout the board, so those areas are covered, right? You got kids in the area, but a lot of it is about changing the infrastructure so that people aren't incentivized to drive fast, right? If you recognize that, hey, this isn't gonna travel as quickly, you figure out your timeline, maybe you leave home from a little bit earlier and kind of plan things out. I've learned over time to kind of slow things down myself. After COVID, it kind of really helped me calm down rather than be as anxious as most drivers can get out here. But being able to make those changes is helpful. We're also looking at potentially just lowering the speed limit citywide. Super quick, I'll make up the soapbox. Speed limit implies there's a limit, which means you can't go, hey, we'll give you 6 miles above the limit. That doesn't make it a speed limit. So when you're bringing it down, you still get the 6 mile per hour gap. A limit means limit. We want to make sure we actually define that so people know how long they should be driving and make their plans appropriately.
Okay, we have a few more questions here that are pretty specific. So since we are at about 7:30, I'm going to say come find one of us if you have a specific question that didn't get answered about a specific project, and we'll talk you through that. In the meantime, I want to thank the Horner Park Jazz Band. And hire them for any upcoming events you may have. And we also want to thank Dom House. Thank you so much, Dom House.
Get your drinks and tip your bartender. Support these local businesses relevant here. Thank you all so much. We're going to be around, ask all the questions. Thank you. Thank you.